I'm Tom Gillesberg, the chairman of the Schiller Institute in Denmark, and I'm very grateful for having this opportunity to interview His Excellency Manuel Hassassian, the present Palestinian ambassador to Denmark for the last 4 years, I believe.
Yes.
Appointed by President Mahmoud Abbas. But you also have a very distinguished career behind you, both in the diplomatic field and also in the academic field. So why don't you introduce yourself for the audience? So
thank you very much, Tom. It has been a pleasure seeing you for the second time, and I am really overwhelmed by your generous offer to interview me. I'm a supporter of your institute, as you know, and you have done so much, to the cause, to international humanity, and this brave step of interviewing a Palestinian ambassador in Denmark. I was born and raised in Jerusalem. I went to the Friars School, which is the Saal brother, for my high school. Then went 2 years for my associate degree at Birzeit University. I was in the liberal arts. Then I was accepted to finish my BA at the American University of Beirut, which is considered to be one of the most prestigious in the Middle East. Then in 1975, I got my BA and went to Ohio, to the United States. I did my master's degree in international relations at the University of Toledo, Ohio. Then I continued my education, pursued my PhD at the University of Cincinnati, Ohio, and I got my PhD degree in 1986. I came back to Bethlehem University in 1981 while I was, preparing for my dissertation. I was an assistant, not even assistant, I was an instructor, in 1981 because I didn't finish my PhD, but I became Dean of Students. In 1986, I became assistant professor, and I stayed as Dean of Students 9 years. Then I became an associate professor, and I became the Dean of the Faculty of Arts. And in 1996, I became the Executive Vice President, which is the highest position of a Palestinian in a Catholic school. And in the year 1999, I got full professor from the University of Bethlehem, and all my work was assessed by professors in the United States to give me this distinguished title. I have taught with a colleague from the Hebrew University, from the Truman Center, Professor Edward Kaufman, for the last 26 years. We stopped, during COVID. I was, appointed ambassador by President Mahmoud Abbas in the year 2005. I served 13 years as the Palestinian ambassador in London. And then in 2018, I moved 1 year and served in Hungary. And for a question of disagreement with the Hungarians, we were disputing their transfer of their embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. So I was called by the president to come back. I stayed 1 year, and we never had any representation at my level. So when I was transferred to Denmark to become the ambassador, a year later they have appointed a Palestinian ambassador to fill the gap. So here I am. I've been 4 years in Denmark. I really appreciate, the Danish public. They're very supportive of the Palestinian problem because they are champions of human rights, and they have been during the Holocaust, when they helped, all those diasporized Jews who have been slaughtered, by the Nazis and the fascists. So there is a long record for Denmark to be a champion of human rights. And we are not surprised to see the same people are with the same stamina of supporting the Palestinians, at least on the public level. where they want to see a cessation of this conflict and the opening of borders for humanitarian assistance. And unfortunately, the government is not on par with the public opinion.
It's like at the time of the Danish occupation. You know, it was not the government who helped the Jews get to Sweden.
It's the people.
It was the people.
Absolutely.
And I think that's an important
that's why
point.
I'm trying to draw a comparison, which, you know, with my humble opinion and knowledge about the history of Denmark, I came here knowing a little bit about Denmark, but now I can tell you that I know the culture, the people, the way they think, the way they promote their politics, and I can see there is a wedge between the public opinion, not only on the issue of Palestine, but on issues of local politics. This government is conservative, and we know it is, regardless that it has certain apologetic stance when it comes to Palestine, but still this government helps the Palestinians in terms of subsidies, in terms of infrastructure development, in terms of supporting UNRWA. But on the political level, they are for a two-state solution, but they don't show their political teeth to put pressures on the Americans or the Israelis in order to stop this carnage, this onslaught, this butchery of civilians in Gaza, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem. So we are a little bit, you know, with cautious optimism, we relate, myself as an ambassador, I relate to the government. I can't say that, you know, they have been reticent in receiving me as the Dean of the Council of Arab Ambassadors, let alone that I also lead on issues relating to the Middle East, the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Conference. So we have met several times with the Foreign Minister, with the Deputy Foreign Minister, with the Director of MENA, and we had you know, regular discussions about, you know, the updates of what's happening, you know, in Palestine, the Middle East, the Red Sea, the burning of the Quran, and what have you. So I can say that there is a certain kind of a rapport between our embassy, the Council of Arab Ambassadors, that of the Danish government. But we don't see immediate action. We don't see in the bilateral relations coming out strongly in supporting the Palestinians, stopping this carnage. Today, our people are dying from hunger and starvation, lack of medicine, food. There 36 hospitals have been destroyed. We only have 6 operating now. It is a shame that 12,000 children have been martyred, let alone more than 8,000 women and elderly. And these are staggering figures. I mean, during even the Second World War, we didn't witness such a magnanimous number, you know, of casualties. So this systematic onslaught on our people is not only, and allow me to say, it's not against Hamas. Now it is obvious it's against the Palestinian people. They want to draw us into the sea, into the desert, and once they finish with Gaza, they want to start, and they already started in the West Bank, let alone, you know, they're putting economic strangulations, all kinds of hurdles when it comes even during the month of Ramadan for our, you know, faithful to go and pray in Al-Aqsa Mosque. So you can see there is a systematic policy of apartheid, ethnic cleansing, and decimation of a nation. So all these three are being practiced by such government that is a very, very, very extreme fascist government. I would say it, sorry, I have to say fascist government, because the way it has been playing this conflict, it has been ruthless in its, you know, policies. It never showed any kind of tolerance, but the absolute idea behind this is the reoccupation again, officially, the West Bank and Gaza. And this is where we have to have the international community, with all the UN resolutions that have been in favor of Palestine. Unfortunately, they have been vetoed by the Americans. And that's why for 30 years the Americans have failed to broker the peace process because they were supporting the top dog over the underdog. And now we are looking for a collective brokership, i.e. starting with the United Nations. Maybe Denmark could play a very important role, let alone Europe. And we are not dismissing the United States, but it cannot be the sole broker in this conflict because they have showed their reluctance in finding plausible solution to end this conflict. All the Americans have been doing for the last 30 years is crisis management.
Now we reached clearly a point, and I think the story is October 7th happened, then this whole thing started. But if you look at the process that was ongoing in the West Bank before October 7th, it clearly was that these policies we now see in place of basically annexing both the West Bank and Gaza to be permanent part of Israel. That was already ongoing. It's not like the attacks began after October 7th, huh?
Actually, you have hit the bullseye with this comment because unfortunately the international community, Europe, America, and what have you, thought that this conflict started with October 7 with the onslaught of Hamas against innocent civilians. But nobody have even thought about the root cause of this problem, which started 75 years ago. Let alone in 1948, our people were diasporized, and this Zionist entity has been established and created by the support of Great Britain and the international community, with the displacement of the Palestinian people and the creation something called the State of Israel. And people are not aware that we have been living under occupation for so many years, and Gaza have been strangulated for the last 16 years with the economic blockade and with the lack of any kind of basic subsidies. And of course, if you put anybody in the pressure cooker, it has to explode. And the explosion of October 7 for the Gazans by Hamas and Islamic Jihad and others was a mere reaction to this blockade, to this suffocation of 2.2 million people living in the most densely populated in the world. And people started looking at Hamas and others as being, the terrorists, but they forgot that Israel has been practicing state terrorism. This is not the first onslaught on Gaza. This is the fourth war against people in Gaza. And it has been ongoing onslaughts in the West Bank with the building of settlements, with the settlers taking the law in their hands and trying to uproot, the Palestinians, trying to uproot the orange trees, the olive trees, and trying to create havoc among the Palestinians by shooting, by killing, by looting, by uprooting, and what have you. So the question should not be a separation of Gaza from the West Bank, let alone East Jerusalem, with all the settlements, with the creeping settlements that have been taking place by a government that is called to be a settlers government. This land grab also created a certain kind of chaos and confusion, let alone stringent policies against the people living in East Jerusalem. And today, during the month of Ramadan, also we have been seeing harassments, we have been seeing blockades from people from the West Bank to come and pray, during the holy month of Ramadan. In other words, Israel is creating more tensions, is creating more absolute policies that will make it very uncomfortable for the people living in Jerusalem, let alone its continuous bombardment, killing in the West Bank and in Gaza. It is going unstopped by the international community.
One thing is what has been going on for a long time, what you can call the silent death of Palestine. But what we've seen after the 7th of October is, I think, something which is unprecedented since the Holocaust. Maybe there's been other Holocausts ongoing, but they were like in the background. Here we've had fully televised, with the whole world watching since October 7th, this genocide in Gaza. And even the international court came out and says, yes, it is very plausible that a genocide is ongoing. We'll look into it. And meanwhile, we demand of Israel, we demand of IDF, the Israeli military, that they do everything to make sure no genocide is ongoing. Not just because people were killed, but because there clearly was this intention of killing in the statements from the government, from military persons and so on. Now, but this is still ongoing. Now, the Israeli government has said, if we get to Ramadan, we do not have an agreement for Hamas and the other groups letting go of all the hostages, then we will begin an attack on Rafah. Then comes the next phase of leveling Gaza.
Yeah.
And now we are in the Ramadan. So what do you see as this is going to happen?
Yeah. Well, actually, I want to comment on the international court's decision, which was, considered to be like a consulting perspective, which, was totally bogged down by the American veto. So Israel doesn't care about the United Nations and the resolutions. They have never abided by it, because always the Americans are behind them politically by using the veto, let alone military, financial, and they are complicit, with the genocide by sending also certain Marines to fight in Gaza. So this is not something that we don't know.
And all the bombs that is falling on Gaza
are all from American made.
Yes.
And that's why, I wanted to make this short comment that the International Legal Court is an advisory opinion. It's not binding, and Israel, just overlooks that, and they don't care. So saying this, look today at Gaza. We have more than 31,000 martyrs. And I said how many children and women and the elderly. 70% of the infrastructure and the buildings are totally destroyed. Gaza is almost flattened. 2.2 million people don't know where to go. They are displaced from their homes, 1.9 million. Now they are once in the north, went to the south, back to the north. And now with the threats that's coming from Israel to invade Rafah again, is something that shows the intentions of Israel, that Israel is interested in occupying Gaza, in flattening Gaza, in getting rid of the 2 million Palestinians in Gaza. So it is a war on the Palestinians, not war on Hamas. Because if the war was on Hamas, tell me what the Israelis have achieved so far. They did not get rid of Hamas, and they will never get rid of Hamas. I say it, as member of the PLO.
But it's an ideology.
It's an ideology.
You cannot kill an ideology.
Yes, absolutely,
person,
absolutely.
Right?
You just snatched it from the horse's mouth. Second, they did not manage to diasporize the Palestinians in Gaza, because the Palestinians in Gaza are resilient and determined to stay on their land. They want not to revisit the Nakba of 1948. That's number two. Number three, they are depleting all their resources with no end result. Therefore, they have lost the world public opinion, although still governments support them. And they have now a badge of dishonor on this government in Israel, that is a settler's government, an apartheid government that does not want peace with the Palestinians, but they want to kill them and kick them out of their country. So all this has been negative repercussions when it comes to Israel. So what is the number that Israel wants in terms of casualties to say that my mission or our mission is being complete? It's like 10/0 undefined. Under the rubric of security, Israel has been justifying all its atrocious crimes during the last 75 years of occupation. Israel has been now known not as a democracy, but as a rogue state with the theocratic ideology of, the supremacy of the Jews over the Christians and the Muslims in the world, not only in Palestine. And their consistent systematic policy against the confiscation of land in Jerusalem, the taking over of religious places, the spitting on priests and sheikhs, all this is a reflection of how hateful, these settlers are against, the non-Jewish or non-Israeli citizens, as might say. And look, 22% of the population in Israel are Palestinians who have Israeli citizenship. They are being discriminated against, and they are being put on the radar for them as far as they are concerned, that these are not committed Israeli citizens. Although we are represented in the Knesset, in the parliament, but there is no respect, and they are being treated third-class citizens in what they claim to be the state of Israel, the democratic state of Israel. So from this perspective, we conclude that this government will never have peace with the Palestinians. And this government should not be supported by the international community. It has showed its ugly face of occupation, and it has showed that it's not for the two-state solution. They are for one state, apartheid state, having all the ethnic minorities, the Arabs and what have you, under their control, under the Israeli flag. And that, as you can see, is impossible with the adamancy of the Palestinian people fighting for their inalienable rights and the rights for self-determination in having their independent state. The international community have accepted that during the Oslo process. 30 years, nothing has been done to rectify the situation and to end the occupation. I tell you, violence, insecurity, instability in the Middle East will end with the creation of an independent democratic Palestinian state over the borders of 1967. We already, in 1988, the PLO has given on a golden platter the recognition of the state of Israel on 78% of historic Palestine. What else can we do in order to honor our promises to the international community?
You mentioned this Oslo peace process, and the Schiller Institute at the time, and the leader at that time of our organization, Mr. Lyndon LaRouche, was a very prominent voice in supporting that process, but also saying that it will not be successful unless there's an economic development policy driving it. That is, that both for the Palestinian state to function, but also for Israel to function and for them to live in peace and harmony, there's got to be a collaboration on a greater goal of an Oasis plan for the whole region, which will benefit all.
Yes.
So instead of seeing your neighbor as your enemy, you will see your neighbor as a collaboration partner in this development process. And in light of this terrible onslaught that's been going on in Gaza, we have from the Schiller Institute released a new video of this idea called the Oasis Plan, LaRouche's Solution to the Middle East, where it describes the late American economist and statesman Lyndon LaRouche's proposal, developed since 1975, for peace through development between Israel and independent Palestine by developing water resources, including nuclear power desalination plants, along two new canals between the Dead Sea and the Red Sea, and the Dead Sea and the Mediterranean, transportation and other infrastructure, to create a future vision where Israelis and Palestinians would economically develop the region as a way of paving a path to peace. Before we might get back to what a solution could look like in terms of states, but before that, what do you think of having this Oasis plan proposal, and have a greater vision to make the impossible possible in the region?
I want to be very brief on this comment which you have made. I've seen your video and I was very impressed with your vision for the future. Economic development should be always tied with political stability. And if we are not independent as Palestinians to pursue economic development with partnership with Israel and Jordan, what I call the Benelux model of economic development, where you have, meticulously have stated it in your statement about how to proceed and how to build that kind of what I call sustainable development. That sustainable development would add to the prolongation of peace and stability between the two countries. But we cannot really apply economic development between occupier and occupied. It has to be on equal footing. We have to see symmetrically, both as independent entities. But definitely, the economic development between, and cooperation between countries in conflict will really add to the sustenance of peace, the longevity of peace in the future, where peace and harmony will create coexistence, and that coexistence could be transferred into markets of economic interest, into cooperation, into also wielding public sector with the private sector to come on par with the process of development that is totally tied with the evolution of our curricula, our education, our health, and what have you. And we could, exchange in terms of skill, the developments of countries like Israel. Israel is highly developed technologically. We have the sources of manpower. We are the most intellectuals in the Middle East. So, with resources, with intellectualism, with the manpower that we have, we could create a certain kind of a joint entity that will benefit both peoples. This is the way economic development after political independence is the way towards security and stability. And as you know, the Middle East has been the fulcrum of conflict for the world, because everybody is trying to seek their national interests in the Middle East. Once we have that kind of stability and security, I think we will be open for more economic transactions, for more bilateral, for more international trade systems, for NAFTA kind of economic relationship with Israel, with Jordan, with the Arab world, with the Islamic world. And look, Israel could benefit a lot with the opening to the Asia, to the Islamic Asia, and to Africa, and to the Middle East. So there is benefit much more than non-interest, I would say, in this part of the world. But Israel has been choosing the path of destruction, the path of instability, the path of supremacy, the path of apartheid, over the good things that you have said, which would create that kind of harmony, peaceful coexistence between epistemic communities that have been too long in a conflict, where this is the time for conflict resolution.
So how do you, because even things are so terrible that you would say, how can this end? But all wars do end at some point.
Yes.
If nothing else, simply by exhaustion. And, Israel, even in this short time since October 7th, the Israeli economy has shrunk by 20%. So it's not a free ride. Yes. And if the war expands, as some people in the government in Israel is talking about, to Lebanon, against Hezbollah, against other parties, this is also leaving Israel in ruins. So at some point, and hopefully with Western intervention, hopefully with the United States realizing that they're simply losing all respect anywhere in the world if they don't intervene to stop this.
Yes.
Then people have to sit down. Probably not with the present government. They probably will be kicked out or Netanyahu thrown in jail or whatever. But still, the Palestinians and the Israelis then has to sit down together and figure out how do we solve this in a way where we all can live here. You have earlier written about two-state proposal. You've also written about that maybe it won't be a two-state, maybe it has to be one state. What are your thoughts?
Thank you. Thank you again for a very interesting question. Let me first say that Israel also is paying a heavy price, but not in terms of casualties as much, and we cannot compare it with that of Gaza, of course. But as you said, their economy shrunk by 20%, and if they continue, it will shrink even more. And there will come a time where the Americans, because now they're into elections, they might stop sending arms to Israel, and that will be negative as far as the Israelis are concerned. But let's not forget that 500,000 people already emigrated from Israel since October. And this is a sign that Israel is no more a safe place to live. For the simple fact that this kind of policy has brought negative repercussions on Israeli society. And let me assure you, now the Israeli public is going down the street. They want Netanyahu down and they want early elections. And this is one of the negative repercussions of this onslaught, while Israel misjudged the outcomes. They thought that they will, with a blitzkrieg, they could, flatten Gaza and get rid of Hamas. But now it's becoming a war of attrition. They're not fulfilling their objectives, and they are losing now in terms of international support, let alone that the Gazans have proved their resilience in staying on land. So in general, when you talk about the stoppage of the war, Israel is getting wearing out with all these machines. Look, every day there are desertion from the Israeli army. People now are not convinced in this war because they saw the calamities coming on their society. And I tell you, now they are against Netanyahu, tomorrow they will be against the war in Gaza because they know that it is inevitable historically that they will get rid of the Palestinians. They have to think and to learn how to survive. And I tell you, if you go back to the history of Andalusia, Muslims, Christians, and Jews lived happily ever after. It is not something that we never perceived. We perceived it. But it's Zionism that has been the rooted cause and not Judaism. And that's why we make the distinction. And the Israeli people are not all Zionists. Let's say that not all are Zionists. Many are for the two-state solution. Many believe in coexistence. And that's why we, as Palestinians, would try to mobilize more and more people from inside. Because the change in Israel is not coming from a political diktat from an outside power. Even the United States cannot impose its political diktat to stop this war. Okay? But it has to come from within. And the Israelis from within should understand that such a government is bringing destruction. So far, unfortunately, we did not reach that level in terms of public opinion in Israel. They are all circling around their governments in support because it has been always the security obsession that makes people circulate or encircle themselves and in providing support to their government. Although this government is an apartheid settler government, still majority of the Israelis, right-wingers, are supporting such a government. Unless we change inside the political discourse in Israel, that this government is going to bring in the future total destruction of Israel from within its society, we cannot see any improvement on the ground when it comes to negotiations for a final status talks with the Palestinian side.
Just in terms of on the other side, I mean, that's also why we put out this Oasis plan, is to say, you know, somehow you have to, there's a tendency when people are, you know, in these things, people say, well, first we need the political solutions, and once we have the political solutions, then we can go on to the economic and this whole thing. The problem is, on what basis will you get political solution if there's no trust? So somehow you have to have trust coming on the one side from a vision of how the future should be. Instead of saying the policies today, we simply keep doing what we have been used to doing for a long time with the same results. You have to say we want a different future. We have a vision for the future. But if we want to get there, then we need collaboration, because without collaboration, without burying the hatches, without changing the geometry, we will never get there. We will get not just, I mean, I think there's a recognition in Israel that this is not, you can't go back simply to the 6th of October. That's gone. You're in a different world now. So somehow something has to change. Now, based on that, I would like to ask you, because you've been working when you, as a professor in Maryland, you have been working together with, I think, an Israeli professor.
Edward Kaufman.
On working, simply taught Israeli-Palestinian conflict resolutions class at the University of Maryland for many years. And I think this might be relevant, because what we are going to, at some point, we're going to have people, Palestinians, sitting down with Israelis. Both of them have very good reasons to be very upset and very hateful for what has been happening, because there's a lot of losses, but somehow they have to work together. So could you tell something about your classes, and maybe we could also
and the rest of the question.
Have an idea about that?
Yes.
Can you describe this conflict resolution model and
Yes.
why you have said that there is no military solution to the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians?
Let me make two brief comments. The first comment, I do agree with you. Economic development is a key factor for stability. And in terms, in the context of conflict, what we have witnessed in 1993 with the Oslo Agreement is that we should have strengthened our nexus of civil societies by collaborating economically, education, and what have you, as, you know, part of economic development, in order to make it much stronger in the process of negotiations and in the outcome. Nobody could achieve maximalist position in a negotiating process. It has to be an optimal, which would be, you know, giving in, conceding both parties to each other. But as long as the negotiations are not asymmetrical, where the top dog is over the underdog, you know, that is not going basically to be successful. And that's why I do agree with you. What happened in Oslo is that economic development did not proceed the way it should have been. More settlements have been built. Netanyahu came to power, Camp David failure, and look where we are now. Okay, I will stop on this issue. But I do agree with you that economic development is the fulcrum of any stability in the world. But without political independence of the Palestinians, we cannot talk about the process of economic development in its full context of bringing longevity of peace and what have you in the future. I do agree with you that economic development is extremely important. It could have pushed the peace process, and the negotiations to a much better level. But unfortunately, the Israelis have wrecked this. And to go back to your question on the conflict resolution class that I co-taught with a professor from Israel who is originally from Argentina, emigrated as a Zionist to Israel at the age of 16. Although he is a peacenik, He was the director of Bethlehem. He was chair of the International Human Rights Watch and what have you. So he has a long record of peace initiatives. We taught a class at the University of Maryland together in the classroom, having students, American, Arab, Muslims in the class, like 30 students. And we used to, conduct scenarios of role-playing in order for the students to understand. First, we start with the historic narrative. Each professor will tell his historic narrative, and then we decide to choose one of the intractable issues. One time Jerusalem, one time refugees, one time security, one time economic development, and what have you, and try to put it on the table like a proposal in the United Nations, where Israelis and Palestinians in the United Nations are going to defend themselves whether to agree or not to agree on the proposal. So we divided the class into two, and we started with role-playing. It had nothing to do with the Jewish religious background or Islamic. We just divide them randomly, and they start. We say, you take the Israeli position, and you take the Palestinian position, and the Arab position. And then we put the issue, let's say, of settlements. The Israelis would start, their arguments, in a way that settlements are part of the biblical prophecies. This is the Jewish promised land from God and this and that, And the Palestinians say, we are the indigenous population, you came here, you are Zionist colonizers and what. I'm just giving you an example. And this part, which is adversarial, our theory, is called ARIA, Adversarial, Reflexive, Integrative Action Plan. ARIA, the musical ARIA. So the first stage, which is the adversarial, is the fact that we end up with the dialogue of the deaf. Nobody from the delegates who are negotiating are listening to each other. With body language and screaming, they are trying to take over, the other members to show them that they are right, the other side is wrong. It's been done by both parties. So then, nothing comes out in the United Nations, a total deadlock, a total stalemate. Now, the second step in this theory is the fact each party goes back and tries to assess what they have achieved in the adversarial position. They start to rationalize, was I stupid in going to the anticlimax position, or was it, right to do that in order to impress the audience? Both sides will start rethinking, and this is where we call the reflexive part of the negotiations. I have to tell you that both sides reverse roles. The Palestinians will play the role of the Israelis, the Israelis will play the role of Palestinians. In order to reach the third stage, which is the integrative stage, where we search for common ground. Searching for common ground is the prelude towards positive negotiations. Although still, we will be reaching the optimum and not the maximalist. And once we go through the process of search for common ground, we start indexing and prioritizing which is most important for both to start with in the negotiating process. And there what we call the action plan. Once the action plan is finished, it is all positive because they have agreed to incrementally start with these most important issues while, they're considered to be least priorities until they reach the complex priorities where the conducive conditions in the room through the negotiations will be very positive towards finding a plausible solution. Nobody will be completely satisfied with the outcome of such negotiations, but at least there is a common denominator that I lose some to gain some. And this is what we have done for the last 26 years, not only with students, but with journalists from Israel-Palestine, with politicians from Israel and Palestine and the Arab world, with the military from Israel, Palestine and the Arab world, and what we call second track diplomacy, which has been very successful when we use it. It is so unfortunate that when it comes to first-track negotiations, the mindsets are totally locked in with the zero-sum conflict. Now, we always believe that such a theory, as practitioners, could lead from zero-sum to mutual acceptance of each other. And we believe through reciprocity that we can achieve, the unachievable. And believe me, we use the 6 intractable issues, which is the question of water, settlements, Jerusalem, security, and what have you, with all these segments of society, and we had found plausible solutions. But when it comes to the first track, we are stuck. So I always have enmeshed academics with politics, and that's why, since I'm well versed with history, with politics, with international relations, and of course the experience that I got, in politics when I was in London and in Denmark, let alone in Hungary, have enriched, my perceptions of international cultures, and I have brushed my tool of communication through the understanding of the Western mind, and so far God helped me in achieving, my mission of trying to raise awareness wherever I went. And just, a footnote, I'm a little bit shy to say it, but I have to say, 2015, I got one of the most distinguished awards from the United Kingdom as the most accomplished and distinguished diplomat. Mm-hmm. So all that basically boils down to our contribution in raising awareness. And this is where I meet with civil societies in the host countries. I meet with church leaders. I meet with parliamentarians. I'm constantly in touch with the foreign government here and the foreign governments, in London and in Hungary. And so far we are trying to change some perceptions. And I can tell you, since I came till now, I have seen dramatic changes in, first, the public opinion in Denmark, let alone also in Danish government, although sluggish improvement, but it has been improving. And this is due to our relentless and resilience in trying to instill in the mindset of the Western culture and among the Danish politicians that it is overdue, this long occupation, and that Denmark should recognize as a first step, the state of Palestine in the United Nations.
But exactly this, that of getting the academics, getting the professors, getting the philosophers, the thinkers involved, instead of simply having a primitive political process where with much slinging and whatnot. This is what we do in the Schiller Institute. And on April 13th, we will have an international online conference. It's on a Saturday, called the Oasis Plan, the LaRouche Solution for Peaceful Development between Israel and Palestine and for all of Southwest Asia. And we urge everybody, of course, to participate in that and share the invitation, get involved in dialogue. One big change, like now you're a diplomat in Denmark. I'm very ashamed to see it, but it's not just a Danish problem. We used to pride ourselves of having dialogue, of even if you disagreed, you could still sit down and discuss and learn the other's viewpoint. And exactly that part of diplomacy, you could say, has in the Western world been taken out of the political process. There is no dialogue. There is no trying to see the other point of view. It's just the narrative, the narrative, the narrative. The narrative comes down. It wasn't the Moses coming with the tablets of clay. This is the whoever coming down. This is the narrative. This is what you have to repeat. If you don't repeat it, then you're out. So, and unfortunately, this has very much become the case in Denmark, but I think also most people in Denmark and other places are getting pretty tired of this.
Yes.
They want to be able to think, they want to be able to formulate their own thoughts, and to do that in a good way, you need information, and that's what we do, like with this online conference. But also here, since we are closing, do you have any concluding word for the viewers of also, what do you think, and is there something they should do?
Yes, absolutely. I commend you for what you have been doing. I commend the Institute for its continuous struggle to bring justice to the world. I think this is your noble mission. And we believe that by raising awareness and stating the true facts on the ground, it will make people to listen to you. And I think your approach to conflicts, not only Palestinian-Israeli, but to the international conflict in itself, gives you a great credibility, because you look towards peace and justice through economic development. And your Oasis video is one of the most impressive I have ever seen for Schiller Institute, let alone comparing it with others. And I think you have to continue with what you're doing. I know you cannot reap the benefits immediately. This is an ongoing process by recreating a new generation in Denmark and around the world to understand that wars are quick fixes, but the process of negotiations, tolerance, understanding, justice, human rights is a long process. It's a tortuous path. Once you instill, those good qualifications in the mindsets of people, especially the youth, then we can reap the benefits of your contribution in the coming generation, where in this generation we are sick and tired of regional conflicts, world conflicts, where unipolar power has proved to be a dismal failure. We're looking for a balance of power on the political level, on international relations, but also we need institutes like yours to continue working with civil society, with culture, with proximity of cultures between adversarial cultures, to come to a conclusion where our humanity should not be lost, our fairness should be there, about our inclusion of each other is of utmost importance, and tolerance is the key towards a sustainable development in terms of stability and security all around the world. I commend you for what you have been doing, and I will be from now on a supporter and a spokesperson for your institute, which I think is one of the most brilliant and impressive institute that I have met in Denmark. And my loyalty and respect to you, and I hope that we continue our future relationship by bringing more people into dialogue and try to create, a harmonious peace among adversarials. May God also help us in this process, because really it is full of hurdles and full of complexities, but eventually we shall overcome.
Well, thank you, Mr. Hassassian. It has been a great pleasure, and
my pleasure.
We hope to speak again.
Hopefully.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for hosting me.